think certain things. Often there's a personal, there's a biographical element to that. And the first question was?
Was about traces of the
embedded histories in hagiographies.
Oh, in hagiography, yeah. So again, I mean, I think in the case of a hagiography, a biography that is written very much in praise of that individual, you can still learn a huge amount. If you look at some of the Tibetan hagiographies of religious figures, you may be doubtful about some of the miracles that they performed or the fact that they could levitate and zoom around the room or whatever it is, but there are still all sorts of places where you're getting factual information or at least an idea of how people thought within that society, which are really useful. Again, look at a book like the Babur Nama. Look how much you can learn about India from that book. And again, that was an outsider saying, oh, it's very interesting. There are these people in what we'd now call India who do things like they have a thread and they wear it in a particular way. Or these are certain foods that particular communities eat. Or even in the Babur, go back a little further to, what's he called, that traveller in the 11th century? No, not Batuta. Al-Biruni, yeah, go back to Al-Biruni's writing. He says it's very strange when you come to this land, which we now call India, because people are very busy engaged in dispute and argument. But at the end of it, they don't offer to lay down their lives or have a blood feud or sacrifice their ideas. Instead, they just sort of conclude the very vociferous argument to go home. And he was saying this nearly 1,000 years ago.
The argument to the Indian was alive and yeah, of course, Ranjit in the front.
Patrick, it's actually a simple question. Since you're engaged both in writing and pedagogy, one of the key problems with the study of history in India, it seems to me, is that students don't really know the source languages, the languages in which the sources are written. For the Mughal period, Turki, Farsi, sometimes Braj. So in your new experiment in education, are you going to deal with this very specific deficit? Because this is also what allows our fake historians to get away with nonsense.
Yeah. No, I mean, we are very much. We have one brilliant Sanskrit scholar who's just joined. We have another Sanskrit scholar who's been with us for about 8 months. We're going to try to hire people within Pali, Prakrit, possibly Persian. In Ahmedabad itself, there are amazing archives in all of those languages. There are also Jain manuscript archives in different languages, all of which are sort of massively understudied. One of the most extraordinary things I think about archives in different Indian classical languages is how huge they are. There is so much material that has never been, it's certainly never been put into an edited edition, but quite often it hasn't even been read within our lifetime. And you only have to look at books that were, if you like, rediscovered, of which the Arthashastra is probably the supreme example. You read the Arthashastra and you think, how could this society have been so complex? How could they have had such precise regulations about who was allowed to eat ducks' eggs and under what circumstances? What kind of society generated that kind of book?
A society that was ready for British bureaucracy. It is quite obvious, yeah. I think I have a story about language, actually. One of the biggest departments in the Bombay University, the biggest intake is in Pali. They have lots of people studying Pali, and I thought, how wonderful, there's so much interest in Buddhism. But actually, they only want to learn Pali so that they can translate land records and make money per page on those. So, whatever reason, it's out there, it's being studied, and it's being studied in different ways. And Patrick French is here to sign books, and which are available for sale. And please do remember that while performance is wonderful and listening and conversations are wonderful, we want to sell our books too. Thank you so much for this conversation.
Thank you very much.
begins in neat lines. A poetry reading session. Ranjit Hauskote, Mustan Sirdalvi, and Shri Vidya Sivakumar. Please on the dais.
Since we don't have a moderator for this session, we're going to be reasonably immoderate. But we're going to do 2 rounds of readings. And I do want, as we begin, to thank the organizers of this amazing festival. It's such a pleasure and a privilege to be here in the hills and in this incredible heritage building. No, okay. I'm going to start with something that seems to me rather invocation-like. This comes from a translation I did of a 14th century Kashmiri mystic called Lal Ded. And I think it speaks to all of us, and to certainly those who are in educational institutions. This is VARC 111 in my book. What the books taught me, I've practiced. What they didn't teach me, I've taught myself. I've gone into the forest and wrestled with the lion. I didn't get this far by teaching one thing and doing another. Since the title of our session comes from a poem, I'm really honored that that is so, from a poem that appears in my new book, Jonah Whale, called Pinto. I thought I would read that. It's dedicated to Francesco Grifo, who invented italics, a thing we all use, but we don't really spare much thought for this strange Venetian maverick who slanted what were otherwise reasonably straight letters. So, Pinto. Follow his shaking, roasted hand. He sets chisel against wooden edge, points burin at plate, strikes lead against wedge, lays kern against grain, and so through the night rams out the ringing cavalcade of words. The ink rains down in neat lines, and orchards planted on the sheet. Psalms, verses, prayers grow. He prunes them all with wayward grace. The page burns bright, the typesetter's eyes grow rimmed with red. From staring at tight, infinitely small and mocking margins, his rained lust explodes in hot metal, then fine brocade. Most mornings, he ends up drunk in a canal, bruised from a brawl. One day, he will swing from a hangman's rope, singing to the last. Yes, in 3 languages, yes, I announce, I declare, I proclaim it. I was manic enough last night to smash through all the typefaces, to drug every font, and now in my own sharply cut sans serif, I've slugged this by dimming candlelight for today's edition. This crazed compositor's invocation to a dawn that will break over Venice without his help. Where I'm going, there's blazing horror and no gentle restoration. Pitch, the only ink, flame, the only imprint, and icy darkness, my Lord High Censor. Find harbors, all you galleys that sail out of my mind's bedeviled press. I'm going to switch now to a poem that I thought would be a sort of response to many of the things you said, Patrick, which speaks to questions of history, of research, and, if only I can find it, it's called Ghalib in the Winter of the Great Revolt. And I remember my friend and co-author on a book, Ilya Troyanov, the German novelist. At some point, I was late for a meeting with him, and he said, "What held you up?" And I said, "Well, I was researching for a poem." And he sort of fell off his chair laughing, as novelists tend to look down on poets. And he said, "We're the guys who do the research. What do you need to research for a poem?" So it involved a certain going back to sources and recovering the figure of this poet who was also a political animal, who was in the court of Bahadur Shah Zafar, who was very nearly executed by the British, but his quick wit saved him. And he was a survivor, so altogether a model for many of us, I think, as poets. A Ghalib in the winter of the Great Revolt, Delhi, 1857. The emperor's murdered grandsons hang from the gate of peace like hushed bells, and rifles drill the sentenced air. My neighbor, the flautist, slit his veins last night, burning his prayer book before he died, true to a god of subtle tones, wasted on the deaf. Ghalib writes to a friend, all around us the furies ride their burning horses. It's as though Taimur had broken Delhi's walls again, his cinder-streaked soldiers heaping pyramids of skulls in the streets, and a baker's for orphans to compute the profits of betrayal, the penalties of defeat. Cannon, the only thunder, writes Ghalib, and no rain. Gunners waving St. George's flag have driven the nobles from their charred mansions, tethered the peasants to the Surly River. The coppersmith, tapping at a dead branch, fills the vacant sky with the privacy of his grief. The friend, with a spy at his shoulder, writes back, when did you become a poet of adjectives, roosting in the rafters of a broken house? Ghalib, the owl must hide in the tamarind for now, but the genies of havoc will go on furlough soon. You say your inkwell is empty, but your dry quill still claws at the fibers of the heart. A pharmacist may drug himself with lyric, Ghalib replies, and a tiger may vanish in the rainforest of his hunter's dreams. But the dry quill is a reproach, and this raw winter could be the living tome of my song. Send paper, friend. These are the last pages of my journal I'm writing on. Since the hangman's been an insistent presence in both these poems, I'm going to finish with my part of the first round with a poem called Hangman's Song. Hangman's Song. A tired man will hang at dawn for hearing voices in his head. Tomorrow's newspapers won't be read, and the Republic will sleep peacefully. The Rottweilers have been taken off the leash. They are nosing out children in the dark. Tomorrow's joggers will stumble in the park, and the Republic will sleep peacefully. A white crow settles on a branch stripped of its leaves, which boys shred. The flayed rain trees will soon be dead, and the Republic will sleep peacefully. The lion's open mouth is foaming. His keepers have foraged for flesh all night. They will pile up their plunder at first light, and the Republic will sleep peacefully. A man is horsewhipped for bringing the sky into a cold room without after or before. They will nail his shadow to the door, and the Republic will sleep peacefully. A man swings like a broken clapper in a bell. The hangman knows all, but cannot tell. The Republic must sleep peacefully. Thank you for your attention.
I want to start by saying how honored I am to be here today and to be sharing stage space with both of them. I'm starting with a poem that I think has its genesis at the Ooty Lit Fest 3 years ago. I had the singular honor of meeting poet Nambiar, and I think he was very much on my mind when I wrote a poem called Pamuk Plays the Palanguri. I talked to him about Nambiar, reclusive poet, older brother. He says there are many like him in his state. Ayyappan died on the streets. Chulikad is a warrior. And MT is the greatest of them all. You English literature convent educated girls, step outside, look at the world. My convent was a government school with a ghost in the bathroom. The marble floors were broken cement and cobwebs made for fine hair ornaments. It was first come, first serve, and on the days that you were late, you gazed up at the blackboard in a dimly lit space and wondered about arithmetic. No one taught me poetry then. It was Mr. Bell and Mrs. Bell. It was Kuchu and his glasses. English literature was a father's well-annotated Shakespeare. It was Murder in the Cathedral and Geethanjali. It was the state prayer, the few words of Tamil that I could only hum to. I know not of Bharati, the man I share a birthday with. I know not of Sangam poetry. I immerse myself in the wine of the Madhushala and look for the Saki. I sense the birth pangs in Tamas and read. Yes, I am not partial to your tongue, but I can quote Umberto and Wislava, Neruda and Saadat. Life doesn't come in one language. Neither does love, neither does learning, neither does hubris. Poets live and poets die, penniless in any language. Thank you very much. I heard Ms. Gokhale's speech with a lot of interest today because I don't think it's only writers, but I think anyone who believes in freedom of speech is being challenged today. And I do think writers are the most powerful beings right now, given the kind of world that we live in. And I'm not prone to writing. I think my poetry is a lot of love poetry. But when a little child was raped in the valley, I had to write. And I wrote a poem called Petition. And I wrote it for Asifa, and it was a response to people saying, because it happened in a temple, why didn't the gods listen to her? And this was what I wrote after I heard that. Petition. She saw the child and heard her pleas. The warrior goddess herself was surrounded by conches and ladies in red and white. She sat in a White House pandal, this year's attraction. She who had killed evils and demons was perhaps too busy swimming to stay afloat to save a child. He heard her cries as he danced the tandav, took a drag and made love to his woman. He who had swallowed poison for a cause, surely he'd help. He heard her whimpers as he played the flute, ate butter, chased women as a right. He had saved the honor of a woman once. Surely he'd do it again. She saw the fading light in those eyes as she played the veena, blessed people with knowledge, and sat pretty on a lotus. There were no knowledge seekers in that temple that day. Her eyes were drawn to the stone. She had thought it was precious. Disappointed, she directed money, land, and prosperity to everyone else. Land is not for everyone, certainly not for nomadic tribes. He saw her lying down. He was too prone. Protecting the world was lazy business, and he was taking it easy. He took a nap, a helpful palm to cover his ears. They all heard her prayer. They all heard her name, and they passed her on to the next table. This poem is called Waterboarding. I sometimes think love is not like the movies with candy, and sometimes love is brutal and dark, and I think as poets we seem to enjoy the intensity of that kind of love. So I wrote Waterboarding. Waterboarding. Sometimes love holds your head under water, not hard, just firm. A sure grip, hand on your skull, to make sure you don't get any ideas. Empty your mind, surrender to the water. You're going nowhere and you're not getting out of here. Sometimes love takes a knife to your throat, moves it along your neck, between your breasts to your arm and your wrist. It presses in on that throbbing nerve and draws tears. Allow love to tear into your skin. It's in your blood anyway, and now you can see it stain your path to another world. Sometimes love lays you on a flower carpet so thick and so bright that you tread light-footed, unwilling to stir up the harmony until you, prone, breathe in and out and feel the thorns enter you. Thorns are wounds and fit right in with this version of love. Breathe in song, breathe out betrayal, and watch the shadows glisten.